Do you think from industry's perspective they see a need to move to nuclear?
You know, I think we should take a look at all options. I don't think we should take anything off the table. We need to be, you know, pursuing any type of energy that we can for our future needs here in the state of Missouri. I think nuclear is one of those options that we need to consider, and you know, how you pay for it. That's what this issue is about for us. Just making sure that consumers are protected and that the right protections are put in place. So at the end of the day, we're not stuck with you know, some of the problems that we've seen in other states. And you know, this early site permit proposal is just that very first step in the process. And you know, it's important to set up a good precedent moving forward when we actually have the conversations. If the you know, proponents of this do move forward, that we have a good precedent set in place on how we do build the actual facility at some point, if it makes it that far. You look at the regulated utilities in the state. I mean, they are monopoly utility companies. They do very well for themselves, and this, as we see it, without the right protections put in place, is a huge risk transfer from the utilities down to the consumers. And we want to make sure that that there's the right balance in place, so that it's something that the risk is shared, you know, more equally, and not just a complete transfer of risk down to the consumers. And the way the latest version that I've seen that was voted on in the House last week, if you look at the language in the bill or in the amendment and how they are going to fund it, it comes up to over $100 million price tag on what this early site permit will end up costing consumers, because of the $45 million in principal, plus then you get interest on that for 20 years. And so it gets to be a pretty hefty price tag for consumers, and all the more reason having something that ends up being that much money out of the consumer's pocket, that you have those right protections and you protect their investment. If we, you know, on the consumer side are able to come up with some sort of agreement with the folks who are out pursuing this, I think you could see something get passed in these next 5 days. I mean, I think if you have that agreement, and we continue to try to reach and get to that point where we can have an agreement where everybody can move forward, and again, having that risk balanced properly between the utilities and the consumers, that you can be able to see something get accomplished and put across the finish line. I think it's in the best interest of everybody to try to get something accomplished on this issue. It's extremely important. Everybody realizes the need to have low energy costs. There's lots of different ideas out there on how we get there. Obviously, it would be great to see those come from inside the state of Missouri, and you know, at the end of the day, if that's how this is able to get accomplished and those can be located right here and have those jobs here in Missouri, that's a good thing for everybody. That is a great thing for everybody. We've discussed this issue obviously throughout session and gone back and forth and trying to get something worked out. We continue to do that today, you know, all the way through the end of session. We know the rest of this week we will continue to have those conversations and hopefully can get something worked out to help move this issue forward. Our issues are the same that they've been when this proposal came forward back in November. We just want to make sure that consumers are protected throughout this entire process, including the early site permit, and the ability for the consortium to get those funds ahead of time before energy is produced, which is a drastic change from the way we currently allow that to take place regarding producing energy in this state, and to make sure that investment, if they are to get the consumers money ahead of time to do this, that is protected and done in the right way, to make sure that consumers are going to be, you know, made whole if they don't move forward with what they intend to do. The three consumer protections that we've advocated for being included in any legislation that's going to deal with the early site permit is the clawback or the rebate that says we want to guarantee that consumers get their money back if a plant's never built. For whatever reason that might happen, whether they just choose not to, they decide to go a different route or sell the permit, you know, whatever it may be, to make sure that consumers get their money back since it wasn't used to move forward with building this plant like it said it would be used for. The second thing is to have adequately funded Office of Public Counsel. And then the third thing that we've asked for is for a hard cap on the costs associated with the early site permit, so there aren't cost overruns involved. The way that the Office of Public Counsel is addressed in the legislation that was voted on last week does not sufficiently fund that office that we have advocated for and that we have suggested it needs to be funded at from the get-go. Not only that, it takes away potential resources from the Public Service Commission, which we have no interest in hurting any point along the process of how we make energy rates in this state. And so that just causes us a lot of problem when you hurt that process, and the way that has been drafted in the current legislation that is pending that we've seen. It does hurt the overall process by taking away those resources from the Public Service Commission. We'd like to see independent, sufficient assessment funding for the Office of Public Counsel, and then the rebate, and then the hard cap put in place. Those are the three things that we've advocated for.
Speaking of interest, the flip side of that is if the consortium of power producers was able to come up with another way to fund the plant, consumers would end up paying the interest of that long-term commitment as well. So it seems like half a dozen of one, six of the other. Is there another way to look at that?
Well, doing it that way is how the current anti-QIP statute is set up, and it served the people of Missouri very well. That is the best way to protect consumers, because then at the end of the day that, okay, we are actually producing energy, so then those people were protected. If you got rid of the anti-QIP law, what about people who pay in for the next 15 years and then leave the state? They paid for this, got no benefit for it. And so there's a lot of really good reasons to make sure that you keep the anti-QIP law in place, to make sure that consumers are protected through this entire process. And the best way to assure that protection is the best consumer protective law that we have out there when it comes to this, and that's the anti-QIP statute. It says $45 million cap on principal, but then it allows to collect interest over the next 20 years on that. So at that point,
that collecting interest, do you consider that unacceptable?
The proposal that was first considered or was brought forward, talked about putting this $45 million, or it was actually $40 million, and they increased it to $45 million. And we have told the proponents of this that we would support giving them the $45 million so they can move forward. Our $45 million of consumers' money to move forward with buying this early site permit, as long as, again, those right consumer protections were put in place, and they have not accepted that at this point, but we continue to have those conversations. There's a lot of give and take that can be had through conversations and dialogue with everybody involved in this issue, and hopefully we can come to some sort of consensus at some point. It's very complex stuff, there's no doubt about it, and so it's hard to understand, but it does, things can really change and evolve as we move forward to this Friday, and hopefully we get to a point where everybody can come away and get this issue moved forward.
What are the odds?
I don't know. I mean, it varies from one day to the next, and obviously there's only, 5 days to go. So I think you'll see a lot of pressure built up on both sides of this issue, and hopefully it can come to some sort of resolution.